Okay, well, today I am wearing my Chemical Massacre in Syria t-shirt. It's got the date, August 12th, 2013. And I got this t-shirt at the rally up at Times Square way back in August of 2013. Hard to believe that it was more than 3 years ago now that Bashar Assad crossed the so-called red line and actually used chemical weapons against his own people. Not for the first time, mind you, but actually killed more than 1,000 people. Overwhelmingly non-combatants, including women and children, of course. And this was supposed to be, the red line, which, he couldn't cross according to Obama. And now it's more than 3 years later, and what's changed? Not only is Bashar Assad still in power, but he's actually recovering much territory that he lost. Bombs now with not only from the Assad regime, but also from his Russian allies. Bombs are raining down on besieged Aleppo every day. Obviously, they're trying to destroy the city and make life intolerable and impossible and untenable for the civilian population there, and wear them down through sheer persistence, intentionally targeting water infrastructure, the waterworks. It's intentionally targeting hospitals, serially bombing hospitals, one after another, obviously as an intentional strategy of war. Chemical attacks have continued. Assad was forced to give up his sarin gas, so he simply switched to chlorine. The chemical attacks have continued. There's been at least 3 documented by the United Nations since the one at Ghouta in August of 2013. So basically everything in Syria, after the supposed crossing of the red line, beyond which the world was going to have to act, has just gone from bad to worse. And what I'm here to rant about today is the so-called anti-war position of many of my friends on the left, which is actually a pro-war position. And, at least an honest pro-war position would be honest. But there's something which is really viscerally repulsive about a pro-war position which is dressed up as an anti-war position. There's something, the sheer hypocrisy of it is just really nauseating. And there's 2 ways which this manifests of late. One way is in the line which I'm hearing over and over again, that El Pendejo, Donald, Trump, I don't like to say his name, would actually be the less dangerous candidate than Hillary, because Hillary would get us into World War III with Russia by imposing a no-fly zone in Syria. And there are so many things wrong with this that I don't even know where to begin. For starters, the notion that a right-wing isolationist who wants, a closed empire here within the so-called homeland and wants to, bar Muslims from entering the country and build a wall on the Mexican border, etc., that this is somehow preferable to, neoliberalism and globalism and blah, blah, blah. No, it's not preferable at all. It's merely a different evil and probably a worse one. That's, the first problem, confusing isolationism with anti-imperialism, which are 2 very, very, very distinct phenomenon. One rooted in scapegoating and xenophobia, and the other rooted in human solidarity, which are not things which go together, but things which are antonyms, exact polar opposites from one another. That's the first way that this is messed up. The second way it's messed up is the notion that, who cares if the Syrians die, because their deaths are an acceptable price for world peace such as it is, and that we should just, stand by and just let Putin and Assad continue to bomb the hell out of Aleppo day by day by day, and bomb the hospitals, bomb the waterworks, bomb civilian neighborhoods, because the only alternative would be a no-fly zone, which means World War III with Russia. So, in other words, a great anti-war, quote unquote, a great anti-war slogan or principle would be, Arab lives don't matter. Let the Syrians die. Gee, what a principled anti-war position. All right, and then there's the third way that it's messed up. The third way that it's messed up is the notion that Hillary means it. There's no reason to believe that Hillary means it. Hillary is basically following in the footsteps of Barack Obama, in whose administration she served. And just like Barack Obama said that, Assad's use of chemical weapons would be a red line, which would force the U.S. to act. And then, lo and behold, the U.S. didn't act. And now, 3 years later, Assad is actually on a roll with Russian intervention, recovering territory, destroying the civilian inhabitants of Aleppo, etc. There's no reason to believe that Hillary would actually follow through on her promise. In all probability, it's just tough talk for the campaign, because, she's self-conscious about being a woman and she's not going to really be tough enough, blah, blah, blah. So it's probably just tough talk for the campaign, and she probably doesn't even mean it. And then there's also a fourth way, of course, which is that, I understand the risks of a no-fly zone. Absolutely. It does risk direct superpower confrontation, but the notion that it immediately means direct superpower confrontation is completely off base. Obviously, there would be some kind of diplomatic maneuvers before they actually went ahead and imposed a no-fly zone. And the notion that a no-fly zone would mean shooting down Russian aircraft is if you actually look at the concrete proposals which have been raised for a no-fly zone, it doesn't call for that. It calls for if the no-fly zone is violated, then the U.S. retaliates, or whatever power, preferably with some backing from at least from the UN General Assembly, if not the Security Council, would bomb Assad's air bases and so on, not actually shooting the Russian warplanes out of the sky. So that's the fourth way that it's off base. And then we've got this whole notion that that Pendejo is a peacenik is completely contradicted by his own words. What are you talking about? When he was asked what his plan was for fighting ISIS, he said, quote unquote, verbatim, I'd bomb the shit out of them. This is your peacenik? The guy who wants to, bomb the shit out of them? Which, even the U.S. is not bombing the oil fields that ISIS holds in Syria because of what it would mean for civilian casualties. The U.S. is actually, cooperating with mostly with the Kurdish forces on the ground that are fighting ISIS in northern Syria, northern Iraq, trying to use precision airstrikes, avoid civilian casualties as much as possible, because they understand that this would, massive civilian casualties and really play into the hands of ISIS and provide a lot of propaganda fodder for them, anti-U.S. Propaganda fodder. So the U.S. is quite specifically not doing that. Pendejo has made clear that if he were commander-in-chief, the U.S. would just go in there and recklessly bomb the shit out of everything, especially the oil infrastructure there, and it would look like what happened during Operation Desert Storm way back in 1991, with the oil fields going up in flames and spewing hydrocarbons into the atmosphere en masse. This is not a pro-peace position. And then, in addition to that, he says, I'd take the oil, quote unquote, verbatim. I'd take the oil. I'd seize the oil fields and turn them over to Exxon. This is not a pro-peace position. This is naked, aggressive imperialism with complete contempt for the basic norms of international law. This is not a pro-peace position. This is a position which is displaying utter contempt for the Geneva Conventions, the UN Charter, and international law, a position which is glorifying aggressive law and the illegal seizure of oil resources by the United States. he is obviously going to be the much more dangerous, bellicose, warmongering candidate. Obviously, he's said as much. So I do not, for the life of me, understand where this illusion comes from that Hillary is the one who would get us into World War III. Now, Pendejo is all buddy-buddy with Putin, so he wouldn't necessarily be taking on Russia, but he would be joining with Russia in the destruction of Syria. That's what he is quite openly calling for. And whatever you want to call this, don't call it an anti-war position, because it's a pro-war position. Joining with Russia in bombing the hell out of Syria is not an anti-war position. That is Orwellian hogwash of the lowest order. And one of the most aggressive sources for this line, that Hillary would mean World War III and that Trump is the less dangerous candidate, is from Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, who, again, all of her supporters are out there plugging her as the peace candidate, when she's actually the war candidate. She actually said verbatim that the U.S. should join with Russia and restore all of Syria to government control, which means the Assad regime control. So she basically shares the same position as El Pendejo, that the United States should join with Russia in the destruction of Syria. This is not an anti-war position. This is a pro-war position. And, I will tell you right off the bat that, among these three candidates, El Pendejo, Jill Stein, and Hillary Clinton, the only one who even comes remotely close to being a pro-peace candidate is Hillary Clinton. So, the other two, the ones that you're actually plugging as pro-peace candidates, are actually aggressively pro-war candidates. Thank you very much. So, I'm here once again in the final, rundown to the election, November 8th, to, say that I'm supporting Hillary, and on a completely tactical basis. I'm supporting her in the voting booth, and being prepared to actually oppose her policies once she's in power, if in fact she is the one who we're going to be facing in power. And I hope that she is, because she will be a far less formidable enemy than El Pendejo. El Pendejo would just be an exponentially more dangerous enemy. And this, plays into the other fallacy which goes along with all of this, more generally, the more general fallacy is that, the liberals are the real danger. The liberals are really more dangerous than the fascists, which is perverse nonsense. And if you know anything whatsoever about the history of the 20th century, it's quite clear that no, the liberals are not more dangerous than the fascists. The fascists are like much, much, much more dangerous than the liberals. And this doesn't make me a liberal, okay? I am merely noting obvious political reality. And to deny this is just, all you're doing is displaying your ignorance of history and a fundamental political reality. So, I'm accused of being a liberal. I'm accused of being, another ones, people who've got a little bit more sophistication throw around that, I'm a pop fronter. I adhere to the popular front notion that we should, support the Democratic Party against fascism. Well, it's a different world now. Those rules don't really apply anymore. But the difference was that, the Popular Front was actually a political alliance. And I'm not talking about a political alliance. I am talking about a tactical vote in the voting booth and being prepared to fight Hillary Clinton. And, when she sells us out on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, as she undoubtedly will, and as sells us out in any number of ways. I understand she's just playing the populism on the campaign trail, and much of what she actually does in power, we're going to have to oppose. And I rigorously applaud the astute position of the Black Lives Matter movement not to endorse any candidates. I think that our political movements must maintain their rigorous independence from all political parties. So no, I'm not a pop fronter. I think that our political movements should be rigorously, fastidiously independent from the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and the Green Party. So do what you have to do in the voting booth. hold your nose and do it, because El Pendejo needs to be massively repudiated. He is the candidate who has openly played to hatred and racism and xenophobia, and his politics need to be massively repudiated. And then we can fight Hillary Clinton after that, with no apologies and no compromises. So go do what you have to do, and spare me the absolute abhorrent jive that Hillary is the more dangerous candidate, or that your pro-war position is actually an anti-war position. Don't flatter yourself. Call it like it is. If you support the destruction of Syria, you should just come on out and say, Arab lives don't matter. Okay, this has been the Moorish Orthodox Radio Crusade in its new YouTube existence. Check out my website, countervortex.org, and don't forget to like and subscribe.